PowerPoint. So there we go. I want to thank everybody for coming here tonight. Apologize, I'm kind of backlit. I stayed at the office to ensure good Wi-Fi, and the Wi-Fi has been cruddy. So awesome. So if at any time I'm cutting out, I have people who are keeping an eye out for that. They will let me know, and I have a backup computer. So we don't have any weird pauses like we did a few meetings back. Tonight we're largely going to be talking about a specific component of the comprehensive plan. That would be tree canopy requirements. We'll go into a little bit of detail on that, but before I get to that, I just kind of want to go over kind of the meeting agenda, what we're going to try to achieve here today. The key component is to make sure that we're getting all the information out to people about the current draft. We also want to take feedback back, as we will be working towards a revised draft for the release in August. After we give the presentation, which is pretty much an information dump, we'll then go into breakout groups and we can have individual discussions. It'll be moderated by staff. Really, it's for you to ask any questions that you might have, make particular comments. We do have some sample questions if for some reason the conversation kind of bogs down. But other than that, it really is an opportunity for you folks to interact with one another and interact with staff. One thing I would recommend is we do have this on Zoom meeting, which means that everybody can be heard at all times. So if you can have your microphones on mute until such time as you're talking, that would be awesome. If you have any Zoom related issues, please contact Alex Jarrett there at that email address at kitsap.gov, and she can see what she can do to help you. If it is an actual technical problem with your computer, especially if it's an Apple, we have little or no help for you on that, so I apologize up front. So with that, I kind of like to run through some of the staff who are with us here today that will be helping out during the breakout groups. Colin, do you want to say hi?
Sure. I think many of you have seen me before at previous meetings. My name is Colin Poff, the long-range planning supervisor, and have been working closely with the comprehensive plan and with this tree ordinance as well.
Heather.
Hello, everyone. I'm Heather Cleveland, and I'm a long-range planner with Kitsap County.
Kathleen.
Hi, everyone. Kathleen Barnhart. I'm senior planner also with Kitsap County DCD.
Jim Rogers.
And I'm Jim Rogers, also in long range planning.
And do we have Scott Diener roaming around somewhere?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Scott Diener, manager of planning environmental program, and I work closely with the planners who just introduced themselves.
Excellent. Any staff that I rudely left out?
Miss Kirby.
Kirby, there we go. Kirby, I apologize.
Hey, this is Kirby. I work at thank you.
Okay. Well, again, thanks everybody for being here. This really is talking about tree canopy retention. The board, during the process, we've heard a lot of testimony about the importance of having trees in development and preserving trees where we can. Obviously, those conversations have been in part of other processes as well, such as the size of the urban growth area boundaries, whether we're going to convert rural areas to urban or not, as well as the critical areas ordinance, which is a separate process that's been running concurrently. The board back in April, when they established the preferred alternative, they wanted staff to develop a proposed code that ensured that trees were part of new development in urban areas. I want it to be very specific that this code only applies to urban areas at this time. So if you're inside an urban growth area boundary in unincorporated Kitsap, these would apply. There's a lot of reasons for trees being beneficial in our community, but the primary purpose of trees in this code is to mitigate heat blooms from the built environment. We are looking at a lot of new development coming on. We want to ensure that there are trees that are part of that development. Unlike the critical areas ordinance, which is a required element, you have to have it in your code. It has to be done under a guise of best available science. This is part of the zoning code. This is more discretionary, and by discretion, I mean discretionary to the board. The board is very interested in talking about tree canopy retention, but is not necessarily required to adopt any specific version of it. We currently have landscaping codes that require a certain number of trees in residential, multifamily, and commercial development already. The board is interested in working towards there being more trees, and more than that, really very interested in creating incentives to maintain existing trees on the property. However, all of that needs to be balanced with a number of the other codes I mentioned. The critical areas ordinance is expanding some protections. We're keeping the urban growth area buffers, or sorry, urban growth areas small. We're not small, but not bigger. And we aren't really adding a lot of additional land. So pretty much the land we have inside our urban growth areas right now are what we're going to be working with for our new housing, our new people, our new jobs. So we need to balance, again, the protections of trees with the ability to provide affordable housing, to be able to accommodate people, and to be able to provide local jobs. So again, that is a balancing act. The balance is in the eye of the beholder. But there is no one answer on this. I just kind of want to highlight that as some of the comments we received so far. We're drawing direct parallels between the CAO and the tree canopy retention, and while they're connected, they don't have the same legislative requirement. So what the preferred alternative, basically it indicated that we would draft a code that tries to keep this process understandable to staff, developers, and the public. So they know what people have to do, and the public will know what is coming, and they'll know if it's not happening. So to that, we try to keep the regulations somewhat understandable. And this is code, so I'm using the word somewhat understandable, as these are written for attorneys in a lot of ways. Tree requirements, basically there are a certain number of trees that you're required to have on a piece of property. Those are called tree units. So if you have X acres of land, you have to have Y number of tree units in your development. Tree retention is incentivized with unit credits. So basically I need to have Y number of trees on the property. I can either A, retain existing trees on the property, and that's worth more, or I can plant new trees, that's worth less. I'll show you those ratios here in a moment. But again, the idea being is to encourage people where possible to keep existing trees, especially bigger trees in their development, and not cut them just because it's easiest. These tree unit requirements are going to be limited only to subdivision and project approval. So if you have an existing lot right now and you want to build a home, these do not apply to that. It would apply to the subdivision of that lot, but not to the actual construction of your home at that time. So again, think subdivision, think multifamily projects. Trees within critical area buffers and landscaping requirements count. So basically the idea is that we're providing more trees, and obviously the critical areas provide a certain amount of protection and a certain number of trees in development already, as do landscaping standards. So again, the board is very interested in creating more trees in development, but does not want to make projects unaffordable or unable to be developed. Again, that delicate balance. Impacts will be deducted from our land capacity. So anybody who's seen my presentations before, there's a math problem running behind our comprehensive plan. We have X number of people, we have Y number of homes, and we need to figure out Z number of acres. How many acres of urban area do we need to accommodate these people? Because a vast majority of our growth is expected to go under urban growth area boundaries. Retaining trees can have an impact on the number of units you can get on a piece of property. Not always, but sometimes, depending on the size of the lot, the topography, all the things. So we have to make sure that that's calculated into our math problem. So the staff draft that came out several weeks ago now, it was based on previous drafts released in December 2023 that everybody had the opportunity to take a look at. A number of people provided comment, and also those of other counties. We looked at Pierce County, we looked at some other counties that are doing this type of thing, as well as talk to their staff to see exactly how they're working. Code is only as good as its implementation, and we're finding that there's a lot of challenges with tree retention codes, regardless of which jurisdiction we talk to. We wanted to acknowledge potential changes to stream buffer protections. I'll talk about that a little more here in a moment. So if the stream buffers expand, there is going to be more trees that are protected in the development with or without tree retention, and we want to make sure that that is considered. We need to balance the focus on housing diversity and affordability, especially infill development. Infill development is planner speak for little tiny lots that are wedged in between existing development. That could be pre-GMA development, that could be post-GMA development. They're usually pieces of property that had some kind of challenge. Either A, it was hard to get a road to it, it's hard to get a sewer line to it, or there's some kind of environmental feature, a slope, a wetland, or a stream. So we should expect, because our urban growth areas are not getting bigger, or that much bigger, the development is going to have to be looking at those pieces of property. And that is good for the county, and the fact that we're able to produce a more compact urban development. And we cut back on carbon emissions from people driving. It makes transit, it makes sidewalks, it makes all these things a lot easier. And like I mentioned, this is a hybrid of tree retention and tree replacement. So again, we're encouraging trees to be retained, but we're not requiring them to be retained in the current draft. So like I mentioned, this only applies to urban areas. It applies to subdivisions or single family or multifamily development, creating 4 or more developable lots. So again, if you're doing small subdivisions or you're putting in a triplex, it would not necessarily apply to you. But if you're doing 4 or more, this code would apply. We are really focusing on the retention of trees greater than 18 inches of diameter at breast height. I'm only going to say that once. It's a DBH. I'll say DBH from now on to speed things up. Basically, that is how what's the diameter of the tree at chest height, which is again keeping the idea that we want these codes to be understandable, so someone could walk up to a tree and figure out how big it is without needing a elaborate report or expensive report, depending on what is being required. And then, of course, tree retention is preferred to tree replacement. So now I'll get into some of the math related to the code. So like I mentioned before, there are tree unit requirements. Basically what you see here is you see a set of, just a second, all your faces are in the way. Basically this is the credits you get for existing or replaced trees. I'm starting with this to kind of describe again that incentive to maintain existing bigger trees. So existing healthy trees, so ones that are already on the property, are running roughly from about 1 tree credit all the way up to 3.5 tree credits if you're wider than 24 inches DBH, and it kind of graduates in between. Bigger the tree, the more units you are worth. If you're not an existing tree, not one that's already been on the property, you are a replacement tree. And replacement trees come in 2 forms. They come in 2-inch caliper, deciduous or broadleaf trees, maples. Replacement trees are 6-foot tall evergreen trees. They are worth more. Evergreen trees also carry with it a few other climate change related benefits. So at this time, it has been given a little extra incentive for people to plant evergreen trees. So that's what the tree credits are worth. Here's what a development would need if it was moving forward. We're focusing this on the gross acre, so basically the entire size of the property. We're doing that again for simplicity, but we're also doing it because there's a lot of things on a piece of property that could reduce gross acre to what we call net acres. Net acres is very subjective. It's hard for people to fully understand. So we are talking about the full size of the property when I talk about the number of acres here. So if 1 acre in the urban low zones, those would be your single family zones, would need 20 tree credits per gross acre. Urban medium and urban high would need 10. Urban low intensity commercial, which is your downtown Kingston, it's your neighborhood commercial like Old Town Silverdale. And then you have, that would need 15. And then urban high intensity commercial, that would be your commercial zones, your regional center, your low intensity commercial. And again, this is largely applying to single family and multifamily construction. So retain trees. What kind of trees are you able to retain and get credit? Post-development life expectancy greater than 10 years. sound and solid trunks, no insect or pathological problem. Individual trees and groupings of trees are proposed for retention shall be wind firm. That we used to call wind throw back in the day. They are expected to stay standing after all their brothers and sisters have been removed. Trees greater than 8 inches of DBH, again, diameter at breast height, located within a critical area or a shoreline and their associated buffers may be credited. So not all trees in the critical area buffer count, but those greater than 8 inches in DBH do. The idea being is that those developments already have a certain amount of trees on the property per another code, that we are allowing them to count those towards. So it's not necessarily additive to folks who are already working around a critical area to preserve no net loss. And then no state or county invasive nuisance or other species are allowed to be credited. So you can't plant them and you can't save them and include them. So again, we want to make sure that we're really trending towards native, but also making sure that we're not creating any additional problems for ourselves. Replacement trees, we utilize the landscaping code a lot when we're talking about replacement trees. We don't want to create a new set of standards for everybody to have to understand, because we're going to have landscaping requirements as well. So there's landscaping requirements, and then there are requirements for replacement trees. We want those to be as similar, if not identical, as possible. So basically, the minimum size shall be 6 foot tall for conifer and 2-inch caliper for deciduous or broadleaf trees. Replacement trees must be consistent with a species list. We are getting some kind of back and forth on that as to whether the species list is something we should put in code and what should be on that species list. I think there's a number of folks who view certain native vegetation as more problematic than others. We need to be having that conversation, and that may need to be flexible over time. Putting something in code is not the best idea if you want something to be flexible, because you have to go through a wide process just to make a small change. Individual species of non-native replacement trees, so again, trees that are not native to this area, if they are to be planted to count towards these numbers, they may not exceed 35% of the total number of all replacement trees. So you have to have a good component of native trees and not necessarily all ornamentals. Minimum of 50% of the required trees need to be in protected tracts rather than on private property. So that would be things such as roadways, recreation areas, stormwater tracts, and critical area tracts. Trees may be planted on a solitary basis or within clusters to form stands or groves. Some other comment we've been receiving is that we should be giving credit for people who are keeping trees in stands or groves beyond those who are just keeping them solitary, standing by themselves. I think they perceive that as the groves of trees are less likely to blow down, and they are more protected and provide a greater set of benefits. So what are some of the other components of the code? You need to have a tree canopy protection plans. Trees must be clearly delineated on the site plan and on recorded documents. So basically what that means is if you're going to be preserving existing trees, you have to ensure that you have a plan to protect their roots and make sure that you are not injuring the health of the tree during construction. And then after the fact, any trees that are retained or replanted need to be delineated on the final plat. So people know that these are protected trees. These are trees that are intended to stay and were counted towards the approval of the development. And then tree maintenance. If you're going to replant trees, you need to make sure that they're watered and maintained as you would landscaping for at least the first year. I'm not going to talk about exactly, okay, what would this code do? Remember, the board's interested in there being more trees than the current landscaping or the future or critical areas code may be requiring. So this is a plat that was done a couple of years back. It is Minder Meadows. It's urban low residential, so 5 to 9 dwelling units an acre. Unfortunately, the image I have here shows it when it was fully cleared, so we can't really tell what kind of existing vegetation was on it. But this is really intended to kind of show how this code adds trees to the property. So roughly you got almost 3 acres of gross acres of land. At 20 tree units per gross acre, you have 60 total tree units. This project, as approved a couple years back, only had 32.5 tree units. So largely this proposal would require an additional 27.5 tree units. As you're going to note, as I'm showing some of these examples, there obviously is opportunities to redesign this project to potentially save some of the existing trees that might have been on the property, or to be able to do other things to meet these codes. But what you're going to find is with a lot of this, you are very likely going to be impacting the number of lots or the number of units. Yes, you can move from single family to not multifamily. Oh, you can't go to multifamily too. Single family attached to get more in a smaller area. Though we are also seeing a lot of folks who are concerned about increased densities abutting their lower densities. So there is that kind of back and forth as well as we try to address neighborhood compatibility. Again, there's a lot of different things that have to be balanced against one another, which is what makes our job so incredibly challenging. And we appreciate the community participating in this task. The second of which is a different development called Parkside Lane, still urban low. Property's a little bit bigger. You still need 20 tree unit credits per gross acre. So in this case, you would need 73. This project only had 25, would only have 25 tree credits. What you're seeing here is that would require 48 additional credits needing to be applied for. This still has some, not applied for, but included, sorry. As you see, there is some existing vegetation still on this property. So some of that could be retained and that could actually help meet those numbers. Though you're also noticing that some are in places that are necessary for fire access and other things, so those would still need to go. I only show these examples because yes, it's going to require more trees, but could have an impact on the number of units that can be produced in these areas, and or the impact on the cost of the development, which, as we all know, cost of development is spread amongst the properties. And one thing I say in every presentation when we're talking about housing impacts, when we talk about code, I'm not just talking about private development impacts. I'm talking about impacts to our housing authorities and our nonprofits that are actually producing a significant amount of our affordable housing. They have to follow the exact same code requirements as private development, so we have to be cognizant of that as well. So I'm actually wrapping up mercifully. What we have here are what are the main considerations moving forward? And I've kind of hit on some of these already. Small lots and those without critical areas will be most effective. If you have a stream buffer on your property and it's forested, likely a good number of those trees are going to count towards your number, and it might not be as impactful because you already have to retain them as part of the critical area protections. But if you don't, like the properties that I just showed, which are basically flat and dry, you have to be able to either retain or replant all pretty much anew on somewhat small lots. Flexibility in lot sizes, dimensions, and housing types will help. So basically we're making it a lot easier to do multifamily and attached housing. We are removing things like setbacks, reducing parking standards, and a number of other things that will help. So projects that I showed you a moment ago, they would have other options to design their project, but likely there is still going to be some loss of lots or units. And how many would that be? And how many would it be before the project is no longer viable? That's going to be a project by project determination, but we're going to have to try to take a look and see, okay, how many lots are you generally potentially losing from this? How much additional effort will this create, and what will the additional cost of development? We are looking to make housing cheaper. So the more studies you have to apply, the more uncertainty that you create for people who are looking to build development, the more expensive it gets. And again, all development costs are largely passed on to the buyer. Should there be a tree bank system as an option? If so, how? So what is it? There might be some properties that are too small to be able to meet the tree units and still have a project. We don't want to leave a bunch of undevelopable properties. Again, we have not expanded our urban growth area boundaries. We have a lot of housing need. We have a lot of population need. We need to have it inside the urban growth areas where we can. Having properties that can't develop because of a conflict in code is what we'd like to avoid. So the tree bank system would be all right. If you can show that you absolutely positively cannot fit these on this property, is it appropriate for people to plant trees nearby in a public park, in a private park, in properties that are being set aside for long-term open space. Is that something that should be allowable? And if so, how would that work? Nothing in our current code talks about tree banks, but the more we talk to other jurisdictions and the more we talk to a number of folks who are looking at doing this development, the tree bank system comes up more and more often. And then lastly, if we want to preserve big trees, but how will the isolated retained trees be protected? Even if they're healthy over time, that can change. What happens if that tree becomes unhealthy or blows down for some reason or another? How do we go about addressing that if we are going to be giving significant credits, making it very attractive to keep very large trees that might not necessarily be as protected as they used to be? So wrapping up, basically what you're seeing here is this is a presentation and we're going to have additional public outreach opportunities. But the next big item is on August 30th, we're going to be releasing the comprehensive plan, development regulations, final environmental impact statement, and capital facilities plan related to the draft code. Things will start to move relatively quickly. There will be some public workshops in September, a virtual one like this and an in-person one located here in Port Orchard. That'll be in the middle of September. We're going to have additional stakeholder discussions with the environmental community, the realtor community, the development community, our community advisory councils, all of the people we've been talking to throughout this process to see their viewpoint on the entirety of the code, including tree canopy code. Then you get to the public hearings in October and November with board adoption, hopefully December 2nd. It's due by December 31st, but we are looking to get it concluded in December 2nd as we start to run into problems with board forums. So I'm going to leave this up here. And this is, of course, where our comprehensive plan can be found for anybody who hasn't already enjoyed its contents. There's also the email address for any kind of comments, questions, etc., that you might have related to the code. So with that, I'm concluding I've concluded my presentation. I don't really have a lot left to add. So what we will do is we will have Alex break us into, let's go with 3 groups of 12 each. Oh, okay, and just like that, someone left. So let's break into groups of 3 groups, Alex, and we're going to be put there at random. There will be a moment while we transition to make sure that we have the appropriate amount of staff. We don't want to have one group with all staff and all the other groups with just people with community. So we want to be able to stretch that out a little bit. So with that, we will move to the breakout rooms.
Eric, how long are the breakout rooms? I forgot to find that out first.
Say that again?
How long would you like the breakout rooms to last?
45 minutes.
Okay, thank you.
And for folks after the breakout groups, we will not be returning to this. So if I'm not in your breakout group, this is farewell. Parting is sweet sorrow. So thank you very much. And we will see you, everybody, in the breakout rooms.
I'm just moving staff around right now. It'll be just 1 second.
Not a problem. Very anticlimactic. And now.
Oh, yeah. Don't put pressure on me.
I'm sorry.
Let's see. Colin, Scott, and one. Jen. Heather and another. Kathleen. Harvey. And
Anybody know a joke?
It's not as easy as it sounds.
No, I know. I apologize. Yeah, we appreciate you handling the tech side of this because that's where everything breaks down.
I think we're set up. If I move one of you randomly, I'm sorry about that.
Thanks, Alex.